Hi guys, this is STAAR number 4 genetics. The first section is going to be about Mendelian genetics. Our first section is called monohybrid or one trait genes. So the first word you need to know is an allele. An allele is a different version of a gene. What is a gene? That's going to be an area of DNA that codes for a protein. Your alleles could be dominant or they could be recessive. A dominant allele appears most often and it will always be used with a capital letter. A recessive allele appears less often and it will be a lowercase letter. When we look at diploid cells, remember diploid means you have two copies of a gene. You got one copy from mom, one copy from dad. You could be either homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive, or heterozygous. What does homozygous dominant mean? Homo means same. So both the letters you got, one from mom, one from dad, were dominant. So for example, you got capital letters, both of them capital. Homozygous recessive, again, homo means same, recessive means lowercase. So both the alleles you got, one from mom, one from dad, were both lowercase. By the way, homozygous recessive is the only time we see a recessive show up. Every other time, as long as it has one capital letter, the dominant shows up. So heterozygous is your last one, where one dominant, one recessive. And this is what I was just talking about. As long as it has one capital letter, whatever the dominant is will show up. Recessive, for recessive to show up, I have to have two lowercase. So dominant, as long as there's one, will show up. For me to see recessive, I have to have two lowercase letters together. We're going to add two more words here. The first word is phenotype. The second word is genotype. The word phenotype means your physical appearance, so it's physically what I see. The word genotype means your genes. So, for example, if I were to say AA equals brown, lowercase equals green. The letters I'm using, those are my genes, so that's my genotype. The color I'm seeing right here, brown or green, that's my phenotype because I physically see those colors. Alrighty, let's go ahead and start some practice problems. Here's your first monohybrid practice problem. The first thing you do after reading the question is you're going to go ahead and actually underline the question. What is it asking? So for this one, what percent of their offspring would have long fur or short fur? After we underline the question, we're going to box our traits and our parents. So for cats, you could either have long fur or short fur. My first parent is going to be heterozygous long. My second parent is going to be short. After we've boxed our traits, underlined our question, we're going to go ahead and write our letters. So we're going to choose what letters are going to stand for what trait. We always use the capital letter of the dominant trait. So long fur is dominant, so I'm going to use a capital L. So capital L equals long fur. Lowercase l is short fur because short fur is recessive. Now that I've done this, I'm going to go ahead and write down what my parents are. My first parent is heterozygous long fur. Remember, the word hetero means different. So one letter will be a capital, one letter will be lowercase. My second parent is short fur. I wrote right here that short is lowercase, so that means I need two lowercase letters together. Okay, so now that I've written down my parents, I'm going to go ahead and set up my Punnett square. I separate my letters out, one for each box. So parent number 1, parent number 2, I wrote parent number 1 right here, parent number 2 up here at the top. Go ahead and fill in your Punnett square. And now that we've filled in our Punnett square, let's go back to our question to actually answer it. How many of the kids would have long fur? Well, I know that long is dominant, so it'll have a capital L. The second L could be a capital, or the second L could be a lowercase. So usually, because I don't really care what that second letter is, as long as the first one is a capital, this is how I usually write it. Capital L blank. Because I don't care what the second L is. There will be a second L, I just don't care. Because that first capital L will automatically make it have long fur. So how many of the kids have at least one capital L? 1, 2. So that is 2 out of 4, 50% of the kids will have long fur. For short fur, I wrote right here that short fur is recessive, so I need one lowercase, two lowercase letters. Two lowercase letter is the only time I will see short fur. So how many of the kids have two lowercase? 1, 2. 2 out of 4, 50% of the kids will have short fur. My next question, at this point, go ahead and pause the video, read the question, follow the steps, and solve it by yourself. Alrighty, in cats, pointed ears are most common. If a cat with rounded ears mates with a cat that is homozygous dominant, what percent of the offspring would be heterozygous? So again, make sure you've solved this by yourself before you continue the video and watch me solve it. Practice by yourself. Alrighty, first thing I do again is I underline my question. I'm going to box my traits. I'm going to box in what my parents are. The first parent is round. The second parent is homozygous dominant. I'm going to go ahead and write down what my letters stand for. Pointed is most common, so it's dominant. So I'm going to write a capital P. Personally, I don't like a capital P, so I'm actually going to use a capital E. And then again, a lowercase p, I'm going to use a lowercase e instead. Could be round. Okay, so I'm going to focus on this. Okay, I'm not going to focus on the p because that was what I should have used. I just don't like using the letter p because I don't make a big difference between my letters. Try letters that make a difference, by the way. If your letters look identical, don't use those. Use different letters as long as they make sense. Alrighty, now that I've written down what letters stand for, I'm going to write down my parents. My first one is rounded. Rounded, I wrote right here, is recessive, so I'm going to write 2 lowercase letters. The second parent is homozygous dominant. Remember, homo means same, dominant means capital. So both letters are going to be dominant, capital, capital. Go ahead and put your parents on your Punnett square. So lower, lower, capital, capital. Fill in your Punnett square. And then go back to your question. My question was asking how many would be heterozygous. Hetero means different, so that's 1 capital and 1 lowercase. All of my children, so that was 100%, or 4 out of 4 would be heterozygous. The next section is going to be dihybrid. Dihybrid is for 2 traits or 2 genes. So I'm not just looking at 1 trait here. I'm looking at 2 different ones. So in cats, pointed ears and long fur are dominant over short fur and rounded ears. If a cat that is heterozygous for both mates with a cat that is homozygous dominant and has short fur, how many offspring would have pointed? So first, underline my question. Box my traits. Pointed, long, short, round. Box in what my parents are. My first parent is heterozygous for both, and he mates with a cat that is homozygous dominant for ears, short fur. Write my letters down. Well, notice I have 2 traits. That means I have to write letters for ears. I have to write letters for fur. For ears, pointed is dominant. Again, so I would use a capital P. I don't really like capital P, so I'm going to use a capital E again. So capital E is for pointy. Lowercase is for round. For fur, capital L for long fur, because it told me long fur is dominant. Lowercase for short fur. Let's go ahead and write down our parents. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, I have to write down 2 letters for ears, 2 letters for fur for each parent. So for parent number 1, parent number 2, each one will have 4 letters. 2 for ears, 2 for fur. So my first parent right here is heterozygous for both. So that means ears, heterozygous, capital E lower, heterozygous for fur, capital L lower. My second parent is homozygous dominant for ears. Homozygous dominant, homo means same, dominant means capital, and has short fur. Short fur is lowercase l. What we're going to do is we're going to make 2 different Punnett squares. One Punnett square will be for ears. One Punnett square will be for fur. Alrighty, and let's go ahead and write down our letters. So for my first parent, for ears, he put in a capital E lowercase. That's my first parent. My second parent put in capital, capital. Fill in your Punnett square like normal. And go to your second Punnett square. For fur, my second parent put in a capital and a lowercase. My second parent put in 2 lowercase letters. Fill in your Punnett square. And now we need to actually go back and do the math to figure out what my answer would be. So my question is asking me how many would have pointy ears with long fur. Pointy ears, remember, that's 1 capital E. Do I care what the second E is? No. It could be capital, it could be lowercase. I don't care. As long as I got that first capital E, I'm going to be pointy. So how many out of this first Punnett square have a capital E? That would be 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so 4 over 4.
My second Punnett square, how many of them would have long fur? Long fur, capital L, don't care what the second L is. It could be a capital, it could be a lowercase. As long as I have that first capital L, it'll be long, because long is dominant. 1, 2. 2 over 4. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to multiply these two numbers together. So 4 times 4 in the denominator gives me 16. 4 times 2 gives me 8. Simplify this down. That's going to equal 50% of the children would have long fur and pointed ears. Alrighty, they could also give you a big dihybrid Punnett square. They won't usually, and I'm going to go ahead and go over this in class, how you do the big dihybrid Punnett square. They usually won't give it to you like this though. Instead, what they'll do is they'll already have it filled out for you. If they ask you to fill it out, or they already have it filled out, I'm sorry, all you have to do is count up the offspring. So using the Punnett square to the right, in pea plants, round and yellow are dominant. If two pea plants that are heterozygous for both color and seed shape mate, how many offspring would be round and green? How many would be yellow and wrinkled? How many would be round and yellow? So first thing, underline your questions. We're going to go ahead and box in our traits. So you could be round, you could be yellow, you could be, in the question it says green, wrinkled. We're going to write down what our parents are. Both parents are heterozygous for both. Okay, so both parents are heterozygous for both. We're going to write down our letters. So we're going to have one for color, one for shape. If you are round, dominant, so capital R equals round, that means lowercase r is for wrinkled. And if you have capital Y, you are going to be yellow. If you're lowercase, you're going to be green. We don't need to write down what our parents are and anything like that. All we need to do is just look at our Punnett square and actually go ahead and count up how many kids are each one that they're asking. So the first kid is round and green. Round, don't care what the second one is. Green is lowercase, so it's 2 lowercase y's. So how many kids have at least one capital R? Second R could be capital or lowercase, and 2 lowercase y's. So that'll be, let's see, 1, 2, 3. So 3 out of 16 kids will be round and green. Alrighty, for my next one, it's asking, so we're done with that one. The next one is asking yellow and wrinkled. Yellow is dominant, so capital Y. Don't care what the second Y is. It could be capital, it could be lowercase. And it says yellow and wrinkled. Wrinkled is recessive, so 2 lowercase r's. Notice I did this backwards though. It should be lowercase r, lowercase, capital Y, don't care. This is wrong, that'll confuse you. Do it the same way everything else is already written. So let's go ahead and count those up. That'll be 1, 2, and 3. 3 out of 16 kids will be wrinkled and yellow. My last one, round and yellow. For round, again, round is dominant, so capital R, don't care. Could be capital, could be lower. And then to be yellow is capital Y, don't care. Let's go ahead and count these up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got 8 out of 16. Should be 9. Did I skip one? It is 9. There you go. 9 out of 16 is going to be that. Alrighty. Our next section is going to be for non-Mendelian genetics. Non-Mendelian genetics, the first section is incomplete dominance. For incomplete dominance, neither allele is completely dominant, so they mix. So for this example, in hibiscus plants, red is incompletely dominant to white. If a pink flower and a white flower mate, how many offspring will be red? How many will be white? How many will be pink? Underline your questions. Box in your traits. So red, white, pink. Notice I've got a third color in the question. You have to read the full question to get all the colors. Pink is a mixture of red and white, so I know this is incomplete dominance. Also, it told me in the question incomplete dominance, so look for those signs. I'm going to go ahead and box in what my parents are. So it said a pink flower mates with a white flower. Write down my letters. Here I'm going to have more than one letter. Red, capital R. White will be a lowercase.
The only time I say pink is if it's capital and lowercase. That's the only time I see pink, if it's heterozygous. Let's go ahead and write down what our parents are. My first parent is pink. I wrote down pink as heterozygous. The other one is white. Go ahead and fill in your Punnett square. And then it asks how many of the offspring will be red. To be red, I need a capital R and my second R. I usually say I don't care, right? This time it has to be another capital R, because if I put anything else, it'll give me a different color. So I'm looking for all the ones that are capital. That would be 0%. How many of them will be white? To be white, I need a lowercase. If I put anything else with those lower cases, I won't see white. And that was these two kids right here, so 50%. How many of them will be pink? Capital and lowercase. Again, 50%. That would be these two kids at the top. Alrighty, the next section is for codominance. The word co means both. So both are dominant and expressed. So in cows, red is codominant to white, producing spotted. So in codominance, you'll see spotted colors, striped colors, things like that. So it produces a spotted roan cow. If a red cow mates with a roan cow, how many offspring will be roan? Underline question. Box traits, red, white, roan. Box in what my parents, red cow, roan cow. Write my letters. If I have a capital R, I'm going to have red. If I have a capital W, because remember both are dominant, I'm going to have white. And if I see both together, if it's heterozygous, I'll see roan, which is basically red and white spotted. I'm going to go ahead and write down what my parents are. My first parent was red, capital R, capital. My second one was roan, capital RW. Fill in your Punnett square. And it asks how many offspring would be roan. To be roan, I'm looking for red and white. That would be 50%. Our last one is for sex-linked genetics. For sex-linked genetics, we're looking at alleles carried on the X chromosome. Females, you have 2 X chromosomes, XX. Males, you have XY. We are ignoring all genes carried on the Y. All right, let's read this question. Baldness is a sex-linked recessive trait. If a male who is bald mates with a woman who is a carrier for baldness, how many of the sons will be bald? How many of the daughters? So I underline the question. I box in my traits. I know baldness is recessive. That means being normal is dominant here. I'm going to box in what my parents are. A male who's bald. A woman is a carrier for baldness. So do I see baldness in her? No, I don't see baldness in her, but she carries it and will give it to her children. Alrighty, we need to write down what our letters stand for. If you are normal with a capital N, you will have normal hair. If you have lowercase, you will be bald. Let's write down what our parents are. And we have to do something a little different here. We have to write XX, XY. XX is for the mother. XY is for the father. So for the mother, she's a carrier. What does that mean? She has one normal allele and one lowercase because she carries the gene to her children, but she doesn't actually show it. The father is bald. So remember, we only write one N. I write nothing on the Y because we ignore everything on that, okay? So he only has one N, which is why it shows up immediately. Go ahead and set up your Punnett square. Fill out your Punnett square. Your Punnett square should look like mine when you're done. If you wrote something in the wrong order or if you didn't write it like that, please make sure to fix it. Alrighty, let's go ahead and look at this. How many of the sons will be bald? So for the sons, I'm just looking at these two kids right here. That means if they have at least one lowercase n, they will be bald. This kid right here has a capital N, so he's fine. Ignore him. This kid right here will be bald. So of the sons, 1/2 of the sons, not 1/4, 1/2, because he only has 2 kids, 2 boys, 1/2. So 50% of his sons will be bald. Of their daughters, that's these two right here, of their daughters, we're looking for the ones that have 2 lowercase n's, and unfortunately she would be right there, so that's 1/2 of her daughters. This daughter up here at the top has 1 capital N, so she would be a carrier, but she would not be bald. The bottom daughter, this one right here, has 2 lowercase, so 50% of their daughters will be bald. Okay, and that's it.